Can you be a little bit louder because your voice is too low?
Execution time should be low, sir.
Sorry, Jagdish, you are able to hear?
No, actually, there's a bit of disturbance.
Yeah. I mean, whoever it is, can you put it in a chat window?
Yeah, you can also type it in the chat window, guys. Feel free to type it in the chat window or even unmute and talk. It's like an
Yeah.
informal
I mean,
session.
hope
There's
there are
no
no
teacher
faculty
or
issues,
anyone.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
Jagdish, are
So,
there any faculties in this group?
no, Anna.
No? Yeah, then you people can, I mean, feel free to answer. So execution time should be less. Yeah. Like what he said is partially right. So execution time should be less. That is the expectation from high performance computing. But on the other hand, we need to look at some things which are very important to keep the execution time very less. So if I'm giving you a homework that you can complete in a day or two, okay, let me consider it takes 48 hours to complete a job. So I'm asking you to do that in 24 hours. So you'll not be able to do, because the ideal scenario is that you definitely need 48 hours. Okay, so the execution time uh, cannot be made less unless we do some smart work, or in other words, you deploy two people to do one homework. So in that sense, combining together, they can do it in 24 hours each. So it's totally 48 hours of human work, and two people can do it in 24 hours. So the objective is met. But is it always possible to do a job which can be split into two and hand it over to two people and do so? I mean, you cannot always split the job into two, right? So how we are going to handle those conditions where you are going to deploy multiple computers doing the same task? So we will be discussing about what is the maximum performance which a task can reach. Okay, so here we have some answers. Performing complex calculations at very high speed, yeah, that's high performance computing. And solving large problems accurately. So I will definitely agree to Ashok. Solving large problems accurately. I don't know whether he knows the importance of whatever he mentioned. So the first answer is performing complex calculations, right? So for example, if you want to do some scientific oriented calculations, be it networks or something, so we'll be involving a vector. You might have definitely seen multiplication of vectors, multiplication of matrices, and you know how difficult it is to uh, perform matrix multiplication by hand, as well as doing matrix multiplication for a larger matrix. So you know the practical difficulties. So if you are asked to write a program, um, I mean, how long do you think it is going to take for you to write a program which can multiply two matrices? Say 3 by 3 matrix, matrix A and matrix B. How long is it going to take to program that? No, just the time. How long it is going to take? Maybe 2 minutes. If you're a Python user, you can do it in 5 seconds, maybe. And if you can import it in, you can declare two matrices in NumPy, and if you give a variable A into variable B, yeah, that is going to multiply the two matrices and give you the answer. So, but what about multiplying a matrix of size 1000 by 1000? So, consider two matrices. Each matrix is of dimension 1000 by 1000. So you have 1 lakh numbers here and 1 lakh numbers over there. And the reason why I'm taking matrix multiplication is that you are going to repeatedly use the same number more number of times. For each column and row, you are going to reuse the same number. Okay, so that is quite difficult. So do you think the NumPy library is going to handle it faster? Yes, it may, um, but the problem that happens is that we at sometimes we may not be having the time, okay, which NumPy can take to compute. So I mean, certain things need to be time, I mean, certain tasks are time constrained, so we need to complete it before time. So we'll just discuss about how do we do that. So what are the tools available, and this is more of an theory-oriented discussion. So I'm expecting more participation from you guys. So let's move on. Okay. So what is HPC? We have answered. So what do you mean by a scalability issue? Have you heard of that? Because being a software engineer, end of the day, we should be definitely, solving this scalability problems. So what is a scalability issue? Any idea? I can hear Harshavardhan typing for such a long time. Yep. With the data which we deal with is going to scale up, our system need to be able to handle it. Yeah. So when we give more data to the system, we need a solution on how the system is going to handle it. But there is also one more aspect to it, right? So it's not just about the data that you give it to the system. It is about repeatedly how, the data might get an repetition. For example, if I'm writing a program to multiply two matrices, and I'm giving that as a service to you people, where you can just log in into the web portal and define two matrices of size 3 by 3 or 10 by 10, whatever it is. You can populate the data, and you can right away start multiplying it. So here the first thing is the first scalability is in terms of data, which I need to go from. I should write a program, okay, that should be able to handle an n by n matrix. N by in the sense, considered only square matrix. So we should be able to handle any n, right? So be it 3, 3 by 3, or 10 by 10, or 20 by 20, or 30 by 30, or even 100,000, or whatever it is. So my program should be modular enough. So there is something called as a modular programming that I'll discuss it later. So modular enough to accept input of any size. That is point one. The second scalability comes in terms of number of instances. So what if 100 people are going to use it? So multiplying a 10 by 10 matrix may take some quantum of time, right? So let us consider multiplying a 10 by 10 matrix is going to take 2 minutes time, and I'm completely okay with it. But what if 100 people are going to simultaneously input a 10 by 10 matrix and multiply it? So it is going to create an issue, because if I have to cater that 100 people, ideally it should take somewhere around 200 minutes, right? 2 minutes to multiply one set of matrix. So 100 people are giving input. So in any order it may complete, but to cater the 100th person, it will take 200 minutes, which is somewhere around 3 or 20 minutes. So, but that's not something scalable. So your program may be able to handle matrix of size any size, but end of the day, when 100 users are using, there comes the scalability issue. So the scalability is not only in terms of data, but also in terms of number of instances which you are going to create to compute the same task. So we'll look at how do we solve it. So this is a traditional example, a traditional definition given in Google, so especially from the Wikipedia website. So it defines it simply. HPC most generally refers to practice of aggregating computing power. So what is aggregating computing power is that combining more computers under one roof in a way that delivers much higher performance than one could get out of a typical desktop computer or workstation in order to solve large problems. So let me just ask you one more question, okay? So consider a situation where I am able to do I'm able to do a task, okay, be it a combination of multiple tasks or a single task, in 1 hour, okay? So let's say some random person from this group is going to join with me, okay, who is also having equal caliber. Okay, so don't question the caliber of the person. So he's having the caliber same as mine. So how long do you think it is going to take to solve the problem?
like it reduces the half of the time.
It reduces half of the time. Okay, you all attend CAR sessions? Yep. There is an answer from Sri Ramji saying that half plus some overheads if it can be split. Yeah, there are two things to it, two aspects to it. The first question is whether the problem can be splitted into two. Okay, so if splitted, okay, let me consider it like this. So we are multiplying two matrices, okay, 10 by 10 and 10 by 10. So can this one be split into two tasks, two equal tasks, so that a person A is able to complete it in 30 minutes and person B is able to complete it in 30 minutes? Can matrix multiplication be split into independent calculations? Is there any option? I mean, is there any option? So I have a 3 by 3 matrix here, okay? And I have another 3 by 3 matrix here. Okay. So let me consider another matrix here. This is the resultant. Consider this is the resultant matrix, okay? So do you think matrix operations are independent? Independent in the sense, do you think you can split the matrix multiplication into several multiple subtasks? Is that possible? Hello.
It's not possible.
It's not possible. Okay. So let's definitely get into a discussion. So let me explain something here. Okay, is somebody moving the whiteboard? Jagdish?
Okay, I think the whiteboard is shared. Can you screen share the whiteboard instead of sharing it from the Teams app? Because when we share it on the Teams app, everyone can access it.
So somebody is definitely using it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, there is an answer from Sasidharan saying that I think an n by n matrix can be split into n individual operations. Is it n individual operations? So how many operations are there when you split matrix? I mean, when you multiply the matrix? See, it goes like this, okay? You take one row from here and you take one row from here, you are going to multiply it, and it's like sum of products, right? So this to this to this, and again this to this. Okay, so you'll again fill it here, right? So this is number one, and you'll take another number. So you take again the first row and go to the second column of this. You are going to multiply it. So if you ask me whether matrix operations can be made independent, yes, it can be made independent, because consider somewhere around 9 people, okay, 9 people given this task, okay. So what first person does is he'll go and take first row. This is matrix A and this is matrix B. The first person will go and take the first row from matrix A and first column from this is row operation and this is column. So he'll go and take first row from A and first column from B, and he will be individually multiplying the three numbers and adding it, while the second person goes first row in A and second row in B, and again So similarly, 3, he'll be taking the third row. So totally, this can be multiplication of 2 3 by 3 matrix can be split into 9 vector operations. Okay, so each row in a matrix is a vector, right? Each row or each column in a matrix, you can call it as a vector. So multiplication of 3 by 3 matrix can be split into 9 vector operations. So you just multiply the vector and you take the magnitude of it, so that becomes the value over here. So if I give 10 by 10, okay, 10 by 10, it can be split into 100 vector operations, okay, where 100 times you are multiplying 2 vectors and taking the magnitude. So it can be split into 100 operations. So this is where the machine learning stands actually. So machine learning is completely done in terms of vector operations. So that is the reason why we are able to use we are able to use a proper utilization of CPU and GPUs. Okay, so we'll be seeing how GPU is useful in machine learning and how it is a major contributor in high performance computing. So we'll be seeing. So definitely matrix operations can be split into multiple things, and we can make it as an individual vector operation. So again, coming back to the slide. Okay, so now I think I have given a small introduction about how we are going to split operations. So in this, see, if you take this particular statement, and if you ask me whether two people can do it, one person can do it in 1 hour, and if you deploy 2 people, they can do it in 30 minutes. Yeah, they can do it in 30 minutes. If you take 10 by 10 operation, okay, you can split the first 50 operations and second 50 operations, because the data is constant. Okay, that is important thing. The data is constant and that is available to 2 users simultaneously. If you are going to 10 people can split the job equally. Also they can read the data without any trouble, because we are not updating the data at any point in time. The data is constant, everyone has got a read access, so definitely they can compute and do it. But every operation is not parallelizable. So it's some operations are definitely serial. For example, if we are doing some task, okay, so had anyone been to okay, so most of you are from first years, second years. Okay, so usually we go to Amma's darshan actually. So to Amritapurit we go and attend her birthday. So there the computer science department, especially Coimbatore campus, okay, we take care of the food serving. Okay, the problem that happens is we have some 8 items in plate. Okay, there are some things which cannot be uh, disordered, like in the sense, only after having a rice you can put sambar on it, you cannot reverse it. Okay, it's not that you should not, but ideally we will not be doing it. So there is an order in which we have to plate. So if this is the sequence, though the third person in the queue might be very faster in pouring sambar or something, and if first person is the blockage in the pipeline, okay, he's the first 2 persons are blockage in the pipeline, they are very slow in doing it. So definitely you cannot parallelize the task. Okay, if you try to parallelize, you know what will happen. If 9 people at the same time trying to plate food, okay, so that is going to create a mess, and definitely you're not going to get a proper outcome. So certain things are definitely not parallelizable. So in your understanding, okay, basically, what is the need of a computer other than watching videos and playing games? What is the need of a computer? I think I can save some time if you people can speak. That's point one. And if you can, rather than typing, if you speak, that is going to save even more time. We can discuss a lot of things in the given time to solve some complex task. Yeah, that's point one. There is also another point. Okay, there is something, there is a routines, right? So system routines. So for example, if I'm filling a form, Google form, okay, I must get a mail. So what you do is you just go and you go to the settings and click something where it says email the responses to the user. Okay, so the moment you enter your email ID and you fill the response, you'll be getting an email. Nobody is going to interfere in your process. So the moment you submit it, you're going to get back the response. So that is with one person. Okay, think of something like Google Forms as a free service or Gmail as a free service. If many people are sending several billion informations every hour. Okay, so definitely we need to automate. So that's what Harshavardhan said. We need to automate things. So the
Like
yeah.
like we need computer to store the information or to access the information, like to perform some tasks, to calculate the data, like that we
Yeah.
need the computer.
Yeah, but I have another question there. Okay, so it's a very traditional and naive answer that I mean that's what the basic understanding that everyone has, right? So we need to store the data, we need to retrieve the data. So that is the, and we need to compute. Okay, so if you want to make any operations, and especially if you want to automate any operations, okay, we'll be using a computer. But these days task, okay, it, I wouldn't say it redefines the computer, but at a global understanding, it is going to be different. Okay, it's not just storing, retrieving, and automating. Okay, so it is about how many users you are able to cater and how fast you are able to cater. That is the one understanding, because you have ample of storage to store it, and you have you can, if you store it, definitely you can retrieve it. But the question comes is how fast you can retrieve it. Okay, that is a major issue here. So I mean, can someone just unmute and tell me your system spec? Anyone? Your laptop specification, so whatever it is.
So 16 GB RAM,
Okay.
Ryzen 7 4800H.
Okay.
Uh,
Is that a Legion 5?
and Asus TUF A15.
Asus TUF A15.
Yes. And
Okay.
NVIDIA RTX 2060.
RTX 2060. Yeah, fine. I have a similar spec. So when we spoke about this, okay, so he said Ryzen 7 4800H, right? When you go and look at something called as if you go to CPU, you can see the clock rate. It's mentioned in gigahertz, and definitely there is a RAM required. And when he says it's a 4800H, that is an 8-core processor with 16 threads. Okay, this might be an easy thing to hear, but the question comes here is, there is an processor from Intel, right? Okay, so I mean, whoever answered, can you just unmute and ask, tell me why you chose Ryzen processor?
Due to multi-threading, yeah, I read some reasons, but I don't remember exactly now.
Okay, so why not Intel?
Multiple
Why?
threads, something like that.
Okay, so I mean, the same reason why I bought the same 4800H processor is that it has got 8 threads, and when you compare the laptop with the same price on Intel variant, it is going to give me only six cores. That is only 12 threads. But if I go to AMD, I'll be getting somewhere around 16 threads for the same cost.
Yeah.
So I went with 4800.
So
Yep. So why these threads are important, we'll definitely discuss. There is also one more thing. There is always a hype, right? Which generation of processor you have? Is it Intel 6th gen, 7th gen, 8th gen? So what is so peculiar about going for different generations of processors? Is there, I mean, have you heard of Moore's law?
No,
Yeah, Moore's law states that in the next 12 months, the number of transistors on the chip will reduce by half and the computing power will increase by twice, right?
Yeah. Is it like reduced by half or increased by double?
The computing power will increase by double.
The
I mean, the
size
number
of
of transistors, yes. The
size
number
of the
of transistors,
transistors will reduce by half.
yeah.
Transistor size decreases
Yeah.
by half.
Yeah. So in computers, okay, when we go from high, for example, if you go and check the old processors, it might be having a 28 nanometer fabrication die, and these days now we have reached the Ryzen 4800H is somewhere around 7 nanometers fabricated actually. So the moment you go from this generation to next generation, definitely there will be leap, but we do not know what in terms of what it is going to give a leap. It gives leap in terms of two things. The one is that it reduces the transistors, which also means you can put more number of transistors and increase the computation with the same size processor. Okay, the processor is only a 1.5 by 1.5 inch size, and in which if you're able to reduce the size of one transistor, okay, and you can definitely increase the transistor by 30% or 40% in the next generation. So definitely that is really important, but it also comes with a disadvantage. Okay, the moment you start reducing the size of transistors, you also need to look at the chemical properties of the transistor. You need to look at the thermal properties, how this material is going to response or something. What will happen if CPU temperature increases? It is going to just shut down your system, right? So we need to definitely look at companies need to definitely look at those things. So they're just trying to increase more computation within the same chip size. So that is exactly what the Moore's law means. Okay, so when we come to number of cores, okay, between AMD and Intel, they are giving so much variant, and Intel is not able to compete the price with AMD. That is because Intel is highly optimized for power and computation, where AMD is optimized for general computation and power. Okay, because these days servers are being built with the AMD processors. AMD has got a single processor which can give you 32 cores and 64 virtual cores, nothing but 64 threads out of it. So there is definitely a competition among them, but does how that really helps the developer to overcome the challenge? Okay, because definitely processor is getting increased, but let us see how this is going to develop. So what are the difficulties or disadvantages in your computer, especially laptops? Power is an issue because you need to charge it frequently, right? What are the next? Yes,
Heat.
heat is definitely an issue. Yeah, heat is definitely an issue because people say. Let me ask you another question, which is not listed here. A statement 2 years ago says if you download 1 GB of data in your laptop, okay, in your local internet, you are emitting 1 kg of carbon into the atmosphere. Can you people relate this? By downloading 1 GB file, how you are releasing 1 kg of carbon into the atmosphere? Hello.
Due to some chemical reactions.
Not due to some chemical reactions. Okay, see, when you download a data from YouTube, definitely that is stored in some remote location, right? So remote location or remote servers are nothing but a group of computers, a cluster, I would say, simply say. Okay, that cluster needs to be maintained with some power requirement, and that definitely emits heat. So definitely you need some coolant systems to dissipate that heat. So if you look at the overall process in which, I mean, where the power originates from, consider a nuclear reactor. Okay, the power originates from the nuclear reactor that is being used by the cluster in which your data is being stored. Okay, you all say data is being stored in a computer and we can retrieve it anytime. So consider one YouTube video of high resolution being watched by 1 lakh people in 1 hour. Okay, so each one is going to download at least 500 MB of data. So if you look at that, that's somewhere around 2.5 petabytes of data, 2.5 terabytes of data being downloaded every hour. So if that is the case, that data needs to be accessed by your mobile. Your system has got a power. Your router, starting from your router, that is being given by Airtel broadband. So Airtel needs to maintain a tower. They're using several computers to maintain the data, control the data, the tower, the purpose. I mean, everywhere. If you calculate, totally will be emitting 1 kg of carbon overall through heat, through data transmission, through system maintenance, through the power requirement, everything. So imagining you're downloading file from US. Okay, so Facebook did an wonderful thing. So what they did is they built their data center down the hills. Okay, so the cool air from top of the hills will flow down the hill. It will enter through the data center and it will exit the data center. It will enter the data center on one side with a negative temperature or a very less temperature, maybe less than 10 degrees. Okay, they'll enter the data center. Facebook uses that air, and when it exits data center, that is going to be a really hot air, maybe 35 degrees hot. Consider going from 0 degree to 35 degree, just crossing the server roof. Okay, so there is a kind of scalability that we are talking. So you're saying your laptop is giving it enormous heat, but it doesn't it cannot boil an egg, right? But a data center heat can boil an egg. Okay, so think about number of computers that is being run, server. So if you say cluster, okay, I'll be showing you an image later. So that image will have somewhere around 20 computers in one rack, up to 72 computers if possible. So 72 computers will have 2 processors each. Okay, so one rack which is of your fridge size can minimum accommodate 72, maximum can accommodate again into 4 processors. Each system can go up to 8 processors. Okay, so think of a situation where I'm running such a huge system and definitely I'm just emitting a ton of carbon and using ton of resources. So we are saying maintaining a system laptop is difficult, but maintaining cluster is more difficult. And think of Amazon, which is scattering cloud services to each and everyone. Okay, if you want, you can just go and open an account in one click, but imagine a situation where they are maintaining such a huge cluster everywhere across the world. And so what is a cluster? Maybe I'll answer this. So if you combine a group of a set of computers to do a single task, so that becomes a cluster. And how many computers a cluster can have? Any idea? It's virtually infinite, but definitely if you want to quantify, you can go up to several thousands. Okay, and what is the solution to solve the computing problem? We'll look at it later. Is cloud a better solution? Yeah, I'm not going to answer that because you people are supposed to decide on that after the session. Yeah, so definitely wherever I go, I just present this one content constantly. So developer best practices. So every problem in computing industry, or be it in software industry, originates with this 7 ideas actually. So whenever you program, who is called as a good developer, he should be able to produce an usable software. Okay, it's not just we all used to write a program in command line, right? So it doesn't help anyone. You need to provide an usable software, and whatever you write must be maintainable in the sense someone must be able to read your code and again make a new version out of it, or release 2.0, 3.0 or something. So your software should be scalable, and this is where we are going to discuss today. And your software must be reliable. It's not like today you're going to offer the service and tomorrow you will shut down your service, not because you don't have money, because your software is has become old, or it has become junk. Okay, so extensibility. Today, if you start with developing one software, maybe if you go from Teams actually. So it was Skype was bought by Microsoft, and what you're seeing as a Teams today if you go and check the terminal process, it will be showing our video call as a Skype. Okay, so Teams is nothing but a wrapper on top of Skype. So what is the why not Skype? Because see, Skype doesn't have these functionalities. Be it the group call, or be it the screen sharing, or be it on left side, you have so many things, right? You can create Teams group, you can make a call, synchronize it with the calendar. That is somewhat made for a large enterprise. Okay, and I don't know whether you know or not. The companies like TCS and CTS, they are using the Teams for 5 lakh employees. Okay, one organization, 5 lakh employees they are using. And think of the scale at which if Teams is used by, or Outlook is used by at least some 10-20,000 companies. Okay, there are millions of companies outside. So think about how Microsoft is going to scale their architecture, how big, I mean, how they have to work in maintaining such an architecture. So next becomes the portability. Portability is very important, okay, because if you develop some web app today and you need the same web app in iOS or Android, so you definitely need to give an definitely you need to give a solution in deploying your mobile Android app or iOS app, whatever it is. So there is security, which is less of my concern. I mean, that is very important to any person. But security, there are two aspects to it. One side is outside application security, and application security. Okay, application security, definitely we need to take care. Nobody should be able to penetrate into your application. But beyond application, there is a network security, platform security, infra security. So that needs to be taken care by the individual teams. So we'll look about the scalability today, and how simple it is to write square of a number. Write a program to square number. How simple it is.
It depends upon the number.
It depends upon the number. See, whatever the number is, I just have to multiply the number by same number, right? So what is so difficult about that?
I think he meant it depends on the number of digits per, in the number.
Okay, Harsha has given an answer. X by X, there you go, and a smiley. Yes, it's an X by X, and I'll show you an. Just a minute. Okay, so you can see this, right? You can see an program here, where I have written and calculate square of n, and I'm returning the number, and I have defined the number. So for each number, if I pass, that is going to calculate and return the number to me, and which I have just put it on the bottom, 14916. So what is there any scalability issue in this program? I mean, if you ask me whether that complies all the utilities that I have projected earlier, yeah, almost. Okay, so this is extensible, because if you want to calculate a sum of numbers, you can definitely write another definition and again pass the same numbers, right? So if you ask me whether this is extensible, yeah, it is extensible. Whether it is I mean, this is maintainable, yeah, this is a maintainable code. But is it scalable? Our discussion just starts with multiplying two numbers. Is this scalable?
No.
Why?
Overflow. Maybe the number might get overflowed and it can't.
Number might get overflow and it can't. No, I'm giving only 4 numbers, right? How can it get overflow?
Acha, only 4.
Yeah. Okay, so here the problem is it can calculate only in sequence, right? For I numbers, it will take one first. It will send it to the calculation, square of number, get it and store it, pass to pass 3 and pass 4. That can only happen in a sequence. Okay, no matter what, how small the number may be, you cannot compute at the same time. But if you give this to any modern day processor, okay, or any processor that you have in your laptop, and I mean, it not, you cannot even consider this as a task to the CPU. The CPU utilization will still be 0 because you are using only 0.00001 fraction of the computing power that processor has got, and also two numbers can be multiplied it in maybe nanoseconds. Okay, maybe 2 nanoseconds or even lesser than that. We cannot say that, right? So, but still this is not scalable because, like you said, if you, rather than giving 4 numbers, if you give some 1 lakh numbers, okay, that is going to take two things. One is that 1 lakh numbers must go in serial, compute and get the results back. That is a very small task for the processor to compute. Also, the moment you reach 1 lakh number, 1 lakh into 1 lakh may take some quantum of time from the processor to compute. Okay, so multiplication is nothing but a repeated addition. Okay, so there are fundamentally only two operations in a computer. One is addition and the other one is subtraction. Okay, if you want to divide something, it's a repeated subtraction. End of the day, if you are not able to subtract and you don't have a zero, that becomes the remainder. Okay, so when you look at it in terms of multiple additions and multiple subtractions, 1 lakh is multiplied, 1 lakh is added 1 lakh times. Okay, so that is the kind of computation that we are talking, but still the computer is able to do it in a very less time, right? So let me also show you another code. Okay, how complex is this code? You can see you can have a comparison. Okay, what about this code where it is very clear? Okay, calculating, there is a function called calculate which receives a number and multiplies it and sends it back. So there is a number which has got a list 1 2 3 4. So I'm just iterating over the loop for using a for, and I'm just calling the function with each number and I'm able to get back the result. But how difficult is this program compared to that? You're able to understand anything here?
So difficulty increases a little bit, I guess.
Difficulty is increased a little bit.
I mean the complexity.
Yes. No, complexity and difficulty. Can you brief what is it? Okay, so can I understand it like I used some functions which you do not know in common, right? That map that has got a skeleton, like I'm passing a function and I'm passing a variable number, and end of the day number square equal to set result. Okay, I'm just making a set of result. I'm just printing it as 123 as 149. Okay, so it is complex in terms of programming because definitely you might have not gone through these things yet, but if we are going to use this, okay, the purpose of using a native inbuilt function in any programming language, okay, because every programming language might not be efficient in computing same operations. Like for example, if you want to compute a square root operation, Python might be faster, Java might be slower, or some programming language might be even faster, because if you take C, it will be even faster. But you take another operation, okay, maybe finding a third root of a number, Python may be slower, Java might be faster there, because there is definitely a trade-off between the programming languages. You cannot define this language is going to do much better in this. Okay, for each and every operation you cannot decide, but considering an overall scenario, okay, considering all the trade-offs, I want to complete this project quick, I want an easy programming language, so I want the programming, I mean easily learnable programming language, yeah, then you can choose Python and go. Okay, so choosing a programming language is purely a choice, rational choice made out of some facts and figures actually. So you definitely need to be cautious about that. And coming back here, if this one is going to compute 1 2 and 3, so all I'm doing is I'm just asking the map function to use this function on this data. Okay, so the map function is automatically going to parallelize the task by multiplying, I mean, finding the square root of 1, 2, 3 simultaneously, and it is going to print it to me. Okay, but the problem with the map is that if I increase the more numbers, it may not be able to give it in the same order as uh, what I'm giving as input. For example, if I give 1, 2, 3, 4, it may give 1, 16, 4, and 9. Okay, the reason because it will not be able to do it in sequence, and obviously you know that if though we are giving equal quantum task to different people, okay, some people might do it faster, some people might do it slower. So what happens is, by surprise, and 4 square 16 is able to, Python is able to compute 4 square very much faster than a 3 square. Okay, so we will not get any random, we will be getting a random set of numbers compared to input. You will not get the same, you may not get the same sequence is the trick, but definitely you can control that you need the same set of numbers, and you can do it. That's further deep down into the programming. But all I'm saying is that there is definitely a scalability option in every programming language that you need to understand. And if somebody asks you, is Python better than Java, you should definitely in turn ask them in which aspect. Okay, if they say I want to do this particular task, so which one is apt, either Python or Java, then you can answer that question. Other than that, if they ask you general question, is Python better than Java or Java better than Python, you should definitely ask them in turn in which aspect they are talking about. Okay, so I mean, I know it's too early to ask you, but is there anyone anyone started learning machine learning, AI? Okay, so let me just put this here. This is the list of tools and libraries that a machine learning person will be using, but not every tools. Okay, so even to get uh, specialized in one tool, it may take at least an year or two to explore and understand everything on how to better utilize the tool, because it's not about learning Python syntax. If you go to tutorialspoint.com, and if you can learn the traditional methods, okay, how to define a variable, declare typecasting, what is the scope of a variable, and how to write a function, for loop, while loop, if, else. So this doesn't mean you know the programming language better. You know programming. That's it. If you want to know the programming language, you need to deep down work on that, and only then you can understand the nuances in each programming. So how to better optimize each thing. Then comes the security aspect to it. Okay, so if you go back and check the 7 factors that I told you. If with the current programming knowledge, you can only program a usable software. Okay, that's your maximum that you can reach. But the maintainability, scalability, reliability, extensibility, portability, and security, you can never promise. That comes only out of experience. If you ask me whether my programming consider all these things, I definitely do not care about security, because that's not my cup of tea, or my working requirements never demanded any security related things from me. So I'm out of that security. And yeah, definitely the other things I definitely need to have in my programming, else I'll be the I'll be the one in trouble later, because when it comes to machine learning, that is a problem actually. So um, had anyone heard of this company?
Yes.
Yes, what is this?
It's a company that produces GPUs.
Okay, so what is a GPU?
Uh, it is a dedicated processing unit to like process graphics and all.
Okay,
It works
so that's a
different from a
graphic card. Okay, that's a graphic card, right?
processor, but
So, mm,
it works in a different fashion.
okay, so you said you have RTX 2060, right? 60, right?
Yes.
Someone said, yeah. So, My question is, uh, why not anything other than 2060? Why 2060? Any peculiar reason? Because you have a range of laptops that have a 1650 graphic card, 1650 Ti, 1660 Ti, and RTX is the costlier one. So why you went with RTX? Sorry, 2060 RTX. Any particular thing? Do you play games?
Yes, sir, but not on a high level.
Okay, so what games you play? Hello. Hari Pranesh. Yeah, I think I've asked too many questions to you. Okay, so generally people know Nvidia as a company which makes graphic cards for gamers. Okay, so but okay, I agree. Gamers definitely have a leap in using a different, I mean, next generation graphic card. But when it comes to people who are working in machine learning and AI, also use graphic cards, because Nvidia doesn't make gaming graphic cards alone. They make three types of graphic cards. Okay, the first set of graphic cards which everyone knows is a gaming graphic card, and which is definitely used by machine learning people, as well as as well as by machine learning people, because it's cheap and it is easy to acquire. Okay, and if you say Ryzen 4800H 8-core processor, some task which you can do it on a Ryzen 4800H for 4 hours can be completed using graphic card in maybe 20 minutes. Okay, that is the kind of scalability that we are talking about. Computations scale because machine learning and AI computations are parallelizable. End of the day, all the machine learning and um, AI computations narrows down to matrices, especially vectors. Okay, so vector operations are definitely parallelizable. Um, so definitely NVIDIA graphic cards can be used because of the simple concept that uh, gaming people need and faster FPS games to be played. So there we use vector operations for calculations, and here we use the same concept. So end of the day, be it gaming or be it machine learning, it is going to be a vector operation. And definitely Nvidia is making server graphic cards which are much costlier. A single graphic card might go up to 4.5 lakhs. So uh, and there are in between these two, there is one set of graphic cards you might have definitely heard, that is called as Quadro series. Okay, there are 3 series: GeForce for gamers, Quadro for designer people, and Tesla for scientific computing people. So 3 sets of graphic cards. And also I would like to mention one thing here. Amrita has got an HPC. Had anyone heard of it? Amrita has got a HPC. I wouldn't say it as an HPC, but as far as Amrita is concerned, that's the HPC spec actually. Had anyone heard of it?
You meant the in-house server that they maintain in ICTS? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Okay, so our HPC is an 140 core. Okay, I mean, I'm talking about only the scientific system that we got. It's an 140 core, 1.2 TB of RAM, with 5 NVIDIA V100 graphic cards. So where each graphic card is somewhere around 4.5 lakhs. So we have got an setup which is close to 1 crore actually. So that was bought in 2018 March. Yeah. So if you need an access to it, and if you want to give a try, you can definitely contact faculty, I mean, with whom you are doing the project. So they will definitely help you gain access on it. And when you say graphic card, okay, these are the things that later Nvidia launched it some few months back. And this is the GPU that's a 7 nanometer fabrication. Okay, so the reason why I had put this spec here is there is a third row, right? CUDA cores. Okay, 5248 cores. Okay, so each graphic card is having 5248 cores. So consider it in Amrita we have a 5200 core processor. So 5 processors altogether, that is somewhere around 25,000 cores of graphic computation that we have. So if you ask me whether CPU cores and GPU cores are same, no, they are not the same, but the way in which they perform the computation is much faster when compared to 5.2. Because if you look at the clock rate in CPU desktop systems, we'll be talking in terms of gigahertz, right? It's a 3 gigahertz CPU, 4 gigahertz CPU, the turbo boost is up to 5 gigahertz, something we'll be talking, but here is everything is in terms of megahertz, just like your mobile computer. So consider you have a Qualcomm chipset, right? So if you have a Qualcomm 8-core processor in mobile, and consider having an 8,000 core computation of the same Qualcomm mobile. So we are talking in such scalability. So the idea behind NVIDIA is that, so let us break down the larger computation into smaller one and give it to smaller computation cores. So they are able to pack 5200 cores in one graphic card, and which is a very good leap for a vector operation, especially not for any I wouldn't say any complex operations, but I would simply say a larger complex operation broken into an vector operation at the end of the day can be computed faster in graphic cards. So that is the idea actually. So these are the world's fastest supercomputer. So the fastest supercomputer is in Japan actually, Fugaku. And you look at the number of cores. I'm saying Amrita is calling a system called as an HPC that has got somewhere around 140 cores, just 140. Think of a supercomputer in one location in Japan that has got somewhere around 7,63,848 cores. Okay, that's one single supercomputer in Japan. Okay, and when he said the requirements, okay, you can look at the power requirements. It's 29,819 kilowatts of power every day. Okay, this is where starting from the power generation and everything, this is where the emissions happen, and this is where we are degrading our environment actually. And this teraflops in terms of computation. Okay, so there is something called a theoretical teraflop and practical teraflop. So these are theoretical teraflop. If you say somewhere around 5,37,000 teraflop, you may be getting somewhere around 80% of it. So ideally some 4 lakh teraflops of computation you can reach. So only a few months back, India's supercomputer also entered top 100, but that's not exactly the top 100, but they claim to be top 100, 63rd position overall in the globe. Okay, so India has got an mission called National Supercomputing Mission, NSM, so in which they are deploying servers worth 1,200 crores in India, and that deployment started 2 years back and it will end in 2023, I believe. So you can see most of these servers are powered by NVIDIA. Okay, so this is only a stack of machine learning tools that I put. We'll be in particular talking about the TensorFlow deployment, because I think everyone might have at least heard about what is TensorFlow, and there is something called as PyTorch. Okay, that is from Facebook. So TensorFlow is from Google, predominantly developed by Google engineers. So we'll only be discussing in 2 things. Okay, and before that, this is a pipeline. Okay, I'm not going to ask anything in technical. I'm promising you that. Did anyone start learning machine learning and AI? I'll not ask any technical questions. Anyone start learning?
No.
Hello.
I guess at least 3rd years and 4 years need to say yes because they have a course on it.
Yep. Okay, so you're from 3rd year.
No, I am 2020 batch pass out actually.
2020 pass out.
Yeah.
Okay. So, when it comes to machine learning in AI, but be it any software development, okay, you need to define the problem, you have to prepare the proper data, you have to program it, and you have to deploy it. But Compared to a regular software development, machine learning and AI is slightly different because you have to define the problem, you have to collect the data which is necessary for training scenarios. Okay, so machine learning is all about identifying the pattern, and when next time that same pattern comes, you will take some automated action on it. And the primary work in machine learning is all about not finding the pattern. Okay, uh, because individual patterns can be identified if they have a greater difference. Okay, if two patterns are so close and you're not able to identify it properly, so that fine tuning is the difficult task in machine learning. Okay, and so you have to choose an appropriate algorithm, you have to create a model. So you have definite, I mean, let me say I'm giving you a data set of 10 tasks. Okay, and you're able to identify 10 tasks independently. So when you say this is the sequence, you'll say this is what you're going to do. For example, let me consider 7 days of a week, and each day when you wake up from your bed to I mean 12 hours later you are going to hit the bed, right? So between these time, what are your actions? Okay, so what we'll do is I'll collect the data from you for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, starting from your food habit, your maybe you're going in bike or something. So Wednesday morning, where you're going. So some people might go to temples, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to observe you for 7 days. Maybe I'll observe you for a month. So what I now I've got Monday 4 days, 4 data, Tuesday 4 data. So for each days in a week, I'm having 4 data because I observed you for a month. So I'm just going to create a model, and so now I'll train the model in such a way that it is going to identify the 28 tasks into group of 7. Okay, it will automatically identify 20. I'm giving 28 tasks, so it will automatically identify, okay, these 4 tasks seem to be very similar, so this belongs to Monday. So these 4 tasks seem to be similar, so this belongs to Tuesday. It is going to I classify these 28 tasks into 7 groups, where each group contains 4 tasks which are similar. So I'm convinced now. So when I give a new pattern, okay, so your machine learning model is going to compare that with the 7 tasks and tell you, okay, you're waking up at this time, you're going to temple, so definitely this should be Wednesday. Okay, so you're waking up very late, and you're going for a movie, so definitely this must be Sunday. So this is for a basic understanding, this is how your machine learning model classifies. So I'm doing it. And what if 2 days, okay, what if there is no difference between a Monday and a Tuesday, because it's a very normal common day, or Tuesday and Thursday, leave Monday, Tuesday and Thursday, so they don't have much difference. So fine tuning the model will let you know uh, that definitely could be some difference. So that difference you will identify, and definitely you can categorize, and you will deploy it. So whenever I say, okay, for Jagdish Ram, if these are the things that he is doing today, which day he could be doing this? Okay, I've identified it. But there are some misclassifications because 2 days are closely related. For example, Tuesday and Thursday. So I need to observe him for some more time, maybe for another month, maybe for another month, maybe at least for a year, because there are 4 seasons. We do not know, we will not be able to find the pattern in 1 month actually. So I'm observing him for 54 weeks and I'm inputting the data. So now each week, each class in the sense each day. Okay, so Monday has got 54 data, Tuesday has got 54 data, so he is able to I mean, we are able to classify his actions properly. But collecting 1 year of data from Jagdish Ram is in 1 year task. Okay, I cannot launch a software today. So what I need to do is I need to create a task. uh, I need to create an solution which I observed him for month 1. Okay, I'm observing for him for the month 2. So I need to combine the data from month 1 model, and update it with the month 2 data. So now the classification accuracy increases. So for each month, if I keep on adding the data, it is going to increase the accuracy, detection accuracy, right? So classification accuracy. So this seems to be very simple to say, but that's not the case in deployment actually. So in machine learning pipeline, this is a one-time deployment. Consider this 6 processes for deploying for 1 month. Okay, but here I'm collecting the data, storing the data, I'm enriching. So enriching is a two-way process. That's because I need to collect and store the data every month. Again I need to enrich the model. Enrich in the sense I need to machine learning algorithm, I need to give the updated data. Already there is an old data available, so I need to keep updating my data. The model must be evaluated, and it must be fine-tuned, and it must be deployed. Right? So train and apply. So this is the general idea. But think of a scenario where I'm just keep on retraining. Okay, because Amazon recommender system, every new product comes, it is retraining itself to identify the user shopping pattern or a window shopping pattern, whatever it is. It is trying to classify it, and um, it is deploying. I mean, it is trying to recommend you some better products, and you are definitely happy with it, right? So because Amazon's 28% of the revenue or something, I do not know for sure, but I think 28% of the revenue is through recommendation system, because you are going there to buy one product, and they are recommending you another product, and you are purchasing both. There is always an option called always bought together. Whenever you go and buy a product, if you go and look for a laptop, bottom of the laptop they'll say add one bag, and add a cleaning kit, add an keyboard skin, and they'll say always bought together. So what you will see, okay, these things are bought together, I may need it, so you will purchase it, spending another 3000 rupees in purchase. So Amazon needs to continuously evaluate its user and understand his interest, because um, you may not be purchasing anything during the month of February and March because you're paying for taxes. So they'll not recommend you any lavish items. They'll recommend only go for the compact items. If Amazon feels you'll spend only less, okay, rather than recommending some 10,000 rupees item, they will definitely recommend you some 1,000 rupees an item, tempt you to buy it, because Amazon knows for sure that your purchase pattern is something you will not buy for a large amount in month of February and March. So I need to tempt you because I don't have a business. So I'll definitely tempt you with an lesser price items, which you will definitely get tempted and buy. Okay, so recommendation system needs to run for 24/7 without any downtime. It needs to run. So we look at how TensorFlow supports in deploying and making a large scale deployments. Okay, so if you go to the previous pipeline, so this one, where do you think the scalability issues are present? I just told you the process, right? Let us not go to the machine learning terms. I just told you the simple process from collecting the data to deploying a software to identify my day-to-day activities. Okay, so where do you think is the scalability issue? Any idea?
Maybe data preparation.
Data preparation. That's right.
In model evaluation.
That is also right. Two right answers. Okay. So any other places? Machine learning algorithm, fine-tuning the model, and deployment. There are 3 more places left. So do you think scalability exists in any of these places?
Fine tuning.
Fine-tuning. Yeah, third right answer. Then okay, let me make it simple. Scalability issues are everywhere. Okay, after problem defining, okay, scalability exists in each part of the pipeline. So data preparation scalability issues are like you have to get the data from multiple sources, you have to clean it, and you have to make the data very meaningful to the machine learning algorithm. It's not about we understanding data, it's about the computer and an algorithm understanding the data. So we need to prepare it in such a form. And machine learning algorithm definitely, for example, you all might have learned, okay, there are 8 set of algorithms: quick sort, merge sort, bucket sort, radix sort. There are several sorting algorithms, and we have a theoretical time complexity associated with it. But If I ask you, what if I ask you to sort 1 crore numbers? Right? There is a list which has contained 1 crore numbers. Okay, definitely your algorithm is going to fail, right? At least the system is going to crash. Or even if the system is not going to crash, your OS is not going to crash, your programming language is not going to crash. Um, the problem that happens there is um, the algorithm that you have chosen might definitely go on for another 3 to 4 days. May not be 3 to 4, but at least 3 to 4 hours. Okay, in computing or in sorting the numbers. Okay, if you people want to simply crash, okay, crash your system, do one thing. Go with Python. I would simply say go to Python and create a list. Okay, list of numbers from, just put a range function and create a list ranging from 1 to some 100 crores maybe. Okay, then you start sorting it. The number is already sorted, but just check how long it is going to take quick sort to identify that the numbers are already sorted. It may be in minutes. Okay, so definitely algorithm is a bottleneck at the end of the day. Your um, model evaluation here in the sense machine learning model evaluation, you need to train your model. Okay, as the algorithm has given you some input, some XYZ input, you need to check whether the XYZ input is working fine. So if I give one image, for example, if my objective is to identify uh, faces of each person in Amrita. Okay, I can check with one face or two face, but how do you evaluate whether it is going to work for 10,000 faces? Okay, and if suppose group of people are coming, I'm just going with an automated attendance where group of people enter the block or enter the class. I'm going to identify their faces and go with the system. So it is like after every hour when people enter the room, the server in which I've hosted that facial recognition algorithm is going to go to the maximum, because that's when all people enter and that's when the attendance system need to be active. And think of a scenario where it is sending me 10,000 faces to identify. Okay, because 10,000 people are there in Amrita. So 10,000 faces must be handled. And after everyone enter the class, maybe some 3 minutes of after high task work, after 1 hour after 1 hour class, I'm not going to verify the attendance. So what happens is, for that first 3 minutes, the system needs to handle 10,000 faces. Okay, but after the third minute, for the next 57 minutes, the system will be sitting idle. So just to do that one simple task 12 times a day or maximum, 12 times a day, I cannot invest in an infrastructure which can handle 10,000 cases. So what happens is, I may have to go with some at least 13 to 14 lakh worth of computers to simultaneously handle these 10,000 cases. So that is where the scalability issue comes. And fine tuning of the ML model, again, it is at the system level. It all depends on the person working, but I wouldn't say fine tuning requires a lot of computation, but definitely deployment needs, because after evaluation you will definitely go for deployment and it needs to handle 10,000 cases, right? So everywhere the scalability problem is present in the pipeline. So this is one sample where you are just trying to identify multiple things. The reason why I chose this is not a single class problem. Okay, single class in the sense this is not trying to identify one particular object in this image. It is trying to identify whatever the object is available, what object it is. Okay, so it is trying to handle multiple classes. So there is a car, there is a person sitting here, people are sitting on the top, so it is able to identify each person individually. So it definitely requires so much of computation in doing a multi-class problem tasks. And this scenario, consider it is from a different everyone has got an camera, and people are uploading several TBs of data every hour into Facebook and other social media, be it Insta or be it YouTube or anything. Several TBs of data people are uploading. And what if they need to, be it Facebook or Google or whatever it is, what if they need to process these images and learn from the images, right? That's when they can keep improvising their services. Okay, so think of scenario where it one single image, a computer need to do so many tasks. And if you're giving a different set of image and different forms, actually different resolution videos, photos and everything, and how complex it is going to create a system to handle all these things, and how big the infrastructure must be is the question here. Okay, so end of the day, whatever it is, okay, end of the day, the deployments narrows down to few libraries that are traditionally available. The standard ones are TensorFlow and PyTorch. There are some libraries from Netflix which are not very popular, and I mean there has got a good user base in the enterprise level, but when it comes to research community, TensorFlow and PyTorch are much popular because that goes hand in hand with Python, and moreover maintained by Google and Facebook. So the reason why I want to show here is I had asked two questions, right? What is the extensibility? If you are doing a deployment in web today, and if you want to go with a mobile platform tomorrow, what you're going to do? So that's where these libraries come as an answer. So if you program it in TensorFlow, you always definitely have an option to go for a mobile platform, and you can also go for TensorFlow JS, and you can definitely deploy it in the web. So one library is giving you multiple options for deployment, and this is where the real scalability issues, I mean the real issues are being solved actually. So it's not just about the scalability, it's not about the security, but it's about the extensibility, the reliability, because you cannot rewrite everything from scratch. The moment you have developed the software for 1 month, or let us go for a simple project scenario, you have created an ticket booking system in Java, let's say Java, and the faculty who is going to evaluate needs that project to be completed in Python in another 3 days time. You will definitely not have the mood to do it. And think of an enterprise software where people need to port from one code base to the other code base. It's definitely a tedious task to do. So this is, I mean, that's when the libraries from I mean the large MNCs come in handy, because they'll definitely keep developing it forever. Also they will be providing support for extensibility, functionality, or whatever it is. Any improvements that we need to do, they will definitely give. And what about AWS? Is there any AWS certified developers here? Is there anyone? Okay, so since you people are from first year and second year, I would definitely recommend you to go with an AWS certification. Okay, I'll tell you the basic reason. Okay, end of the day, every company that is going for a deployment definitely deploys their software in one of the cloud providers, either AWS or Google Cloud, and Microsoft Azure actually. So top 3 service providers. And the reason why having a bare computer does not become a service or a server is simply because it's not extensible, right? If I definitely, I mean, if I only look at the computation capability of a server, okay, I'm saying, okay, tomorrow I'm starting a company with some XYZ name, and I'm saying that, okay, I'm able to give and faster, I'm using a very latest processor from the industry, and my infrastructure is very latest. I can give you a service at this cost, same as Amazon or same as Google. Nobody will come to me. Okay, so the reason is it's not just about the computation that I'm giving. It's not about the computers that I'm giving for them to use. It's about the software stack that I'm giving. The simple reason why I had this image is there is something called as a lambda function in between, right? So what this does is lambda function are headless functions. So you'll write only a program. Consider a function, okay, the calculate function. If you write a calculate function, and through APIs, you'll be sending the data. For if I write an square root function, okay, I'll be sending a number. So I'll be calling that function which is running in the remote location. So there is a Python file. When we send the input data, we invoke the lambda function. Amazon will compute. It will input the number and it will compute that particular Python function in their own server, and they will return back the result to me. So I need that host a computer or I need not host a VM to get the data back. So all I need to do is I need to keep my program there, and through API calls I will be sending my data. So Amazon will input the data into that be it Java, Node.js, or Python function. They'll return the result to me. So you might be wondering why the simple pipeline is more popular. The reason is it's not just the Lambda function that is popular here. Next to that there are some green color icons, right? Amazon Comprehend Medical, Amazon Recognition, Amazon Recognition. So what these software stacks does is you need not write a function. Amazon definitely already has got an a service. Okay, that service, if you send an image, they'll send you the list of items present in that image. So Amazon will take care of doing the machine learning part of identifying what is there in that image. So you need not do any machine learning. Amazon will do the machine learning task to identify what are the things present in the image. So all you need to do is you write a Lambda function, invoke the proper service. If you want to convert an audio to text or text to audio or image recognition, whatever is there in that image, if you want to identify, so you send the image through API, they'll get the image, they'll put it in their machine learning system, and they'll give you back the result saying, okay, these are the things present in that image. And if you send an audio file, they'll convert it to a text file, and they'll definitely give back the text. If you send the text file, they'll convert it to an audio. If you send if you take a news paragraph from a newspaper and send it to the Amazon, it's not a recognition actually. I think it's a different service. Okay, so if you send it, they'll convert it to a video file. I mean, they'll convert it to an audio file, and they'll send it back to you. So this is how we started solving the scalability issues. So you need not host the server; the computer needs not be yours. So if you ask me what is the advantage, okay, so if we go with the same attendance system, okay, in our time zone, maybe 11 o'clock I may be starting, and consider another time zone because we are in plus 5:30, and now my attendance system is sending 10,000 people to identify the faces. So consider someone in other time zone, maybe plus 5, okay, 30 minutes ahead of me. So what happens is their data will be sent half an hour before me, and consider for each 30 plus 30 time zone, okay, they'll be sending their data, and the attendance system is successful if you host it in Amazon rather than hosting it in my own system. Because if I use my own system 12 times a day for 30 minutes, so totally out of 24 hours I'm only going to use 36 minutes of computation to that in that computer. Other than that, I'm going to keep it idle for another 23 or 30 minutes. So what I do is I just post it in the cloud. So I pay less actually because of that, because I'm using it only for 36 minutes. So what happens is people from different time zone, once based on their school or their college timing, they'll be sending the data, and Amazon will handle it in such a way that they keep their systems busy, and they'll keep earning. So I need not do maintenance. I need not take care of the power requirement. I need not take care of the cooling requirements. I need not take care of the maintenance. I need not have a person to maintain the computer, making the software update. I did not do anything. I'm just calling a Python file. I mean, calling a Python function. I did not even care about whether Python is installed or not. Okay, because that's the serverless environment. So I'm not hosting a server or an environment. I need not install OS and maintain. All I need to do is I need to have a function. I need to pass on the data, and the Amazon will return me the results. And one step ahead of that, I did not even write a function. I can just click and drag and drop a service. Okay, I need to draw the pipeline where, okay, my image comes, that needs to be sent to the recognition module, and the output must be returned back. So the moment you upload the image, it is going to return the items to you. So this is how we start solving the scalability issues. We, rather than hosting the system, we are using a common service, and we are paying only for what you are going to pay for what you use. So we are going to use it, and we are going to, I mean, rather than maintaining a system, there are indirect costs that are there in maintaining our own infrastructure. So I just go with the cloud infrastructure. So I'm paying only less, comparatively less than my own maintenance. Okay, so this is one similar pipeline which is in GCP platform. GCP has also got certifications in Coursera. You can definitely give a try. And Amazon doesn't have a course; they have certifications. and that might be costing somewhere around 5,000 to 12,000 rupees or something. You can contact CAR if you need help regarding that. And GCP certifications are available based on course type. They'll offer you a course, and once you complete it, they'll be certifying you. So that is there and available in the Coursera. So you can definitely give it a try. And actually, I was in thought of giving you giving examples on this Lambda function and um, Lambda and recognition module, but I think it's already past the time. So maybe Jagdish, we can uh, have another session sometime in the next week where I can, I mean, as a continuation to this session, I can show you, I mean, in terms of programming. So how do we send this, and how do we make a better make use of the cloud infrastructure? So I mean, I'll take you people through these services. So
Yes, and part 2 to this would be amazing.
yeah. So um, any people have any questions?
Yeah. If the participants, anyone is having any question, you can like unmute and ask now, or you can also click on the Slido link in the chat box or on the Slido button on the team screen, and you can type your questions.
There are already there are already a couple of questions. Bro, can you click on that Slido icon on the Teams so that you can also see the question and you can answer it?
Yeah.
Just a minute. No, I mean, where is it? Slido.
In the chat box, there's a link, or in the team screen itself, you can press Slido on the top bar.
No, I mean, chat is this one. See more.
Or let me send the link again. Yeah, I put the link again. The latest one, you can click it.
Okay, for a paper publication related to ML as a beginner, which are the areas that has the highest scope to start with? Okay, so there are two things. Okay, primarily, if you split any machine learning application, that falls under two categories. Um, Predominantly, I would say I wouldn't vouch for any cyber security or security related applications. I will only go with any image or NLP. So NLP, I'm not again going for any audio related things. I'll just stick to the traditional text based idea. Okay, so primarily image based and text based. Okay, nowadays text based problems are gaining more popularity because this is when people started going for chatbots and I mean predominantly chatbots. The other thing is voice to text, and I mean searching applications recommendation, because most of the recommendation system comes from text data actually, rather than image data. It comes from text data, and the other thing is going for big data related applications. Okay, so where you have a data about a data, that's nothing but a metadata, because primarily recommendation systems comes from metadata. So if you're buying a product A and product B, what will be your combined product C? Okay, so what can you combine with product A and B? That becomes the product C. So they will combine it for you, and they will let you know that okay, buy these things. So for simply, I would say NLP is gaining more popularity, and if you ask me whether image is not gaining a popularity, so image is already in standard. Okay, so if you go for any research oriented careers, I would definitely ask you to investigate between image and NLP. But when it comes to enterprise, okay, working on images is much lesser in enterprise than NLP, because any Tom, Dick, and Harry company that is starting today, that is started today, will definitely have a requirement of NLP tomorrow. But only in certain industries, image processing is a requirement. So, but if you come to research oriented field, images are more popular than text. Okay, so I would simply say definitely image is at least 1% more popular than text. So based on your requirement, you have to choose, because publishing a paper should not be a task. Getting something back out of the paper should be the task. So if you're able to present that paper to a recruiter and get an offer, or increase the chances of getting an offer, that's good, right? So if you haven't started with anything, if you don't have any idea on, any preference between images and text, I would simply recommend you to go with the text-based one, because as far as Amrita placements are concerned, text-based ML and AI requirement is more than image-based. That's a point one, because in earlier times, text and image, they were sharing some set of commonality in terms of algorithms and industry. So whoever was working in image was able to work on text. But now, since the tree has gone, the tree started rooting. Okay, so now there is definitely an clear difference between an image person and an text person. Okay, it's not that they cannot switch, but it is that only the more you go, the more experience you get. So you will not have time to go to the other channel. If you are working in NLP, going to image might not be a necessity thing as far as an career growth is considered, or again from image to NLP may not be there. Okay, maybe on the moment you go to some top level where you are managing multiple teams, you may need that knowledge. But other than that, I would simply ask you to go with NLP, because that has got some scope, because as far as image is considered, everything has been ripped off. Okay, you have only a very less scope to work. So if you want to publish a paper, go with NLP. As you know, multiplication has a repeated addition, so does n by n takes O of n time, which we know is not. But want to know how it is still O of 1. Now, I didn't get actually, because multiplication as a repeated addition, yes, that's right. So does n by n, okay, you're asking about matrix multiplication. Matrix multiplication takes O of n time, which we know is not. Now I didn't get, get your question properly. So could you please unmute and ask? Not a session, but this session is amazing. Kudos to Asian chapter chats. I think the third review I can definitely relate it to, who was that? Harshavardhan. I think so. Okay, so
It was me. Thank you.
yeah, I know. So as we know, who asked this question? Can you please repeat it? Can you ask?
Okay, so it was me again, but what I meant is when you in one of your slides you were saying that multiplication is just repeated addition, right? So if you are to say that if I'm going to multiply 20 with 30, so is it still going to do 30 plus 30 plus 30 plus like that 20 times? If that's the case, then it would take 20 operation to finish that multiplication, right? But we still, in terms of complexity analysis, we still consider it as a O of 1 operation. So I was thinking that if that's how the system does it, then why do we consider still as an order of 1? I was just curious. That's it.
Okay, so let me break down some myths about time complexity. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so I think let me just look into the. I just had that file. Sorry, I missed it. Maybe I'll try to convey it theoretically. Okay, so what is the complexity of an for loop?
The number of times it runs, yeah, roughly.
Roughly. So you will simply say O of n, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it
So
would also have those comparison and updation operations, so it'll take some additional as well. But we still consider that as order of n, right? Yeah.
yeah, then let me take this as an myth breaking session. So
You forgot to call him.
Sorry. I'm not going to run this program here. You could, sorry. Okay. So what this program does?
Increment it to 10.
Or
J plus I. Yeah.
yeah.
No.
So,
It's 1 plus 2 plus like sum of first 10 integers.
Sum of 10. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Now,
Yeah, just incrementing it till 10.
till 10.
10 times, basically 10 times. Huh.
Okay. This one.
Sum of first 10 and also adding 10 to it.
Yeah. So what is the complexity of the first function that I have selected? I mean, first computation that I have selected.
Big O of n, like it's 10 basically, big O of 10.
Okay, I would simply say O of n. Okay.
Yeah,
So complexity of this
still all three same.
of n. Okay. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is, okay, I'm just going to tell you that I'm saying this is O of 1.
If you're going to fix it to 10, then it's O of 1.
What do you mean by fix it to 10?
Like if you are, yeah, for this example, if you really want to, like in range of 1 to 10, right? If you're going to fix it to 1 to 10 only, then it's order of 1 only.
Now what is the difference between the first set and the second set?
First set and second set. Instead of adding 1, means in the first set we are adding the I itself. Here we are just incrementing it by 1. And there we are incrementing by an I variable. Here we are adding both.
So fundamentally I mean, when compared to 1 and 3, how different is the second one? Is my question. Why is it O of 1?
No, I think even the top and the third one, it's easy. Even there, if you're going to, limit the range from 1 to 10, then even that is also order of 1 only. Right?
No, I've limited, right? I've just told you 1, 10. That's it.
Okay. Then it's order of 1 for all three, I should say then. I think, okay. Are people comfortable with big O's right here? Because I know that there are a lot of first years. So, I'm not sure. Anna, if you have anything else, no, you can finish that as well. And at the end, those who know the concept of this, they can stay back.
No, no. My idea is to make it understandable even for the first year because
okay, then it's fine. Yeah.
The complexity. Okay, so I mean, generally the way we calculate the complexity is that how many times that piece of code is going to run
with respect to input size.
With respect to input size is the complexity. So here generally this O of n in the sense if the input size is between 1 to 10, this is ideally 1 O of 10. Okay, so even if you, I mean 10 in the sense that is going to run 10 times and that is equal to the input size n. So we are going to keep it O of n. So if I define it as some n and if I'm saying n equal to 1000, so you know that this is going to run 1000 times. So we don't call it by numbers like O of 1000, O of 10,000, O of 9,879. We are not going to call like that. So we are going to compare that same with input. So here, though I'm running it 1000 times, I'm defining it to a number n here. So what I'm going to say is, okay, if it is 1000, that's proportionately 1000 times it is going to run. If it is 10,000, it is going to run for 10,000 times. Okay. So the myth that I want to break here is generally people say it is proportionate to the input size, and the reason why I chose this O of 1 to 10, like Harshavardhan said, here I'm defining it as 1 to 10, and here I'm adding I, here I'm adding 1. So I'll simply break this statement, okay, if it is considered, if n equal to 10, okay, without even going into the for loop, I can just break this statement to initially j equal to 0, okay, then j equal to 1, then j equal to 3, then j, which is in the sense 0 plus 1, 0 plus 1, then again 1 plus 2. So I can keep on splitting this data without the help of for loop, because as Harsha said, this input size is fixed. Okay, I can just, I can, why should I write a for loop? What is the purpose of for loop? I do not want to write adding a number 10 times. Okay, I need not write, okay, j equal to 0 plus 1. This is a simple programming language. J is equal to, now j value is 1, right? So now it becomes 1. So now j is equal to 1 plus 2, that is equal to 3. Sorry, 1 plus 1. Another, I'm adding 1 each iteration. So rather than writing such iterations, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to write a for loop. Okay, in simple terms, for loop is a programming specific concept. Okay, not the computation. Okay, computation happen differently. So programming languages, what I'm saying is, so for each iteration, take the number, add it with some number and update it. So again, next iteration, take the updated number, add the constant number, and again store it. So this is the routine task that I'm using for loop. Okay, programming using for loop. I can also do it manually. So that becomes O of 1. Right? Because this is O of 1. This, if you say number of statements, number of times each statement is running depending on the input. Okay, here I'm running this statement only once. This statement, once for all, I'm going to run it only once. I'm incrementing j by 1 here, again j by 1. I can put this statement 10 times to increment j from 0 to 10. So j will go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right? So this is a serializable one. So this is O of 1. I think I somehow made it clear. So with that understanding, I just now want to see what you asked. So so n by 1 takes O of n. How does n by n takes O of 1?
Okay, let it no, n by n it might no.
It is not the two vectors, right?
No, that's what I'm not, maybe that is not clear. Let us take it as m and n. There are two integers only. Okay, so if I'm going to say, m equal to some number and n equal to some number, and I want to perform an operation m into n, just normal multiplication.
Okay,
so if the programmer, basically the compiler, if it's going to say that, hey, this is multiplication and I don't know how to do multiplication, I will just do it by repeated addition, then what it should do is, if it's say 10 and 20, 10 into 20, then it should either do 10 plus 10 plus 10 like that for 20 times, or it should do 20 plus 20 plus 20 10 times.
10 times,
yeah. So even if the compiler is optimizing, it would take the minimum number on the second part, so that it will do the least number.
So you mean to say it has become another simple for loop, right?
It has, for the compiler, right? Okay. For the compiler, it becomes like whatever is the minimum of n and m, whatever is that, those many operations it will take. But when we are calculating complexity, we will just account it for big O of 1. That's it. We will say it's a constant operation time, but it really depends upon the numbers which you are multiplying, right?
Yeah, but numbers are fixed, right? So you can look at this scenario where I'm starting j equal to 0, and all I'm doing is, for I in range of 1 to 20, add 10 20 times.
Yeah, here this 20 is fixed, but there I'm saying it's m and n.
No, you cannot.
Both are variables.
No, both are variables. End of the day, it must come to a number, right? Without which I cannot multiply. Unless I define it as two numbers, I cannot multiply. The moment I know that those two are two numbers,
okay,
I'm entering a definite pool, so that becomes O of 1. See, as far as the user is concerned, n is not known. It is dependent on the problem. But as far as the computer is concerned, before it enters, it knows what the two numbers are. It cannot operate on an unknown data or an upcoming data. You cannot just computer say, okay, you start multiplying. Meanwhile, I will let you know what the number is.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see other questions, Anna. Yeah.
I think that's it. Looking forward.
They're asking for website suggestions.
Okay, there are three things, three websites which I would definitely recommend. One is Analytics Vidya, Towards Data Science, and Medium.com. If you ask me any one single website, yeah, good websites are there, but that's for a very particular task, because that is under one author. He might be targeting specific applications and specific tasks actually, and it is only to when you go for an independent bloggers bloggers website, they will try to showcase, unless they are trying to teach, they will be showcasing an advanced level topics which they are trying to project to let the other community people know. Okay, so if they have found something new, or if they come across some new research, they will be posting it there, and they will also tell you how to deploy it. But that comes under a different level of learning. I mean, the moment you start practicing more on the fundamentals, you can start doing that. But other than that, if you want to start with I mean, there is one more website that I can recommend. Model machine learning book. This is not a printed edition, but this has been there in a website for around two years or at least. So what this book does is, this will teach you machine learning through a story. Okay, because if you click the murder mystery story, it will you can look at the key concepts here. I will show you. Okay, probability, random variable, probabilistic model, inference, factor graph, and Bayes theorem. So these things are going to be, you need to have some prerequisite, which you can find it in Google, any search result also. That much of prerequisite is more than enough. So if you start learning it through a murder, so they'll say, okay, he'll tell you a story that a murder happened at this time. These were the clues found, and they will relate it to teaching the machine learning to you. So this is one such awesome book. Printed edition is not available, but the whole book is available online. So each one is a task kind of thing. Okay, so meeting your match, uncluttering your inbox. So this helps you identify how mail classifications are happening. So how do we classify the mails from spam mails to important mails? So I think this book is a very good point to start. The other book is ML book. Okay. I think this should be available for free versions. Okay, so I didn't get that one. This book is good. I was about to recommend this book. Hands-on machine learning with scikit-learn Keras. So maybe I'll just send the soft copy of this book to the organizer, so they can send it over to you, because he has started from how to install Jupyter Notebook to do machine learning. See, machine learning has this level of machine learning. You need not look at whether that is an image based or text based. This is a fundamental without which you cannot go to the next level, like a deep learning or something. So moment you come to deep learning, you can just split your work into image and text. Until then, I would recommend you to stick to a general machine learning, because there are a ton of things to learn here, and you need to spend time with a little bit of linear algebra, more of probability, and calculus. Don't worry about that. That's not part of AI unless you are going deep down into it. Okay, as far as a student is concerned, they should be good enough with linear algebra, nothing but vector, matrices, and probability. So I would recommend to go with this one, mbmlbook.com, and I will send the soft copy of this book. And this has got a hosted Git repository where each and every code is available. That is available for public access actually.
Apart from this, you are saying Analytics Vidya, Towards Data Science, and other one?
Medium.com. Yeah.
I think all the questions are answered, Anna.
Okay.
I request all the participants to kindly fill the feedback form in the Teams chat. Be really helpful for the forthcoming sessions as well as recording your attendance. So kindly all fill the feedback form. So that brings us to the end of today's session. Let me take this opportunity to thank you, Anna. It was a really amazing session. You toned it down. I mean, even though the topic is technical, I think no one felt that it was technical. You toned it down so that everyone could understand it and put it in layman's terms. It was really amazing. We are really looking forward to having a part 2 of this session with you, Anna. We'll schedule
See,
it and have
when
it.
it comes to sessions, it's not about showcasing my skills. It's about KT, knowledge transfer. Okay, so if something must be transferred, it must be in simple terms. I mean, it all
Yes.
depends on the audience, right? So let's keep it that way. Maybe next time if you come, I'll just stick to the same topic, but I'll make sure that I'll come with some set of demos. So you all can try it because Amazon gives some free credits for students, so you can definitely try it.
Yes, Anna, that would be amazing. We have the AWS Educate Starter account given by GitHub students back also.
Yeah, then that's not a problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Anna.
Okay, catch you later sometime.
Yes, and thank you so much, Balaji, for this session and for your time as well. I'm sure everyone would have found this very useful. That too, getting an opportunity to learn about this stuff in their first year and second year itself. So, huge thanks to you. And yes, as the Jagdish mentioned, we're hoping to have another part to this session. Thank you, and thanks for your time.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. Okay then. Bye, Jagdish.
Bye, Anna.